Alright, hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish stuff. One episode a day, 7 days a week, and today on the 20th of May, 2018, we are starting the third story of Season 9, which is The Sea Devils, with The Sea Devils Episode 1, and... well, this episode is an interesting one to look at because it sort of it's the first really to try to give any sort of explanation to the Doctor and the Master's relationship. Yeah, the Master is back, and it's sort of, the story is, at least it picks up our characters back from the end of the Demons, with the Master still being in prison. We're on Earth this time, though not actually with UNIT. We just happen to be at a naval defense base and a prison, an island prison where the Master is being held. We open with a rather clunky opening of some people being attacked on a rig, and it's not one of the missteps. It's trying to go for scary, but it more goes for just slightly confused. Mainly because it's like just sort of tilt the camera quite a bit, have the people screaming, shouting for a mayday, and it helps get you into the action, but it doesn't really leave an impact. But it does give you enough intrigue to sort of like bring you in. If this was a new series episode, that bit would probably be the episode's pre-title sequence, which it kind of works. I would love to see an edit of this episode with that as a pre-title sequence. Because it's just sort of that's an interest. It's sort of it's a good way of sort of introducing the episode. But a lot of the episode itself decides to take it slower, which is really, really good. It actually helps. Lets Michael E. Bryant, who directed this one, returning to the show after he directed Colony in Space, to really let himself have some reign of some clever shots. He's obviously they built quite a few sets for this episode, as well as doing a lot of location footage because it takes place in the sea, and the location footage is really really nice. The sets are really they sort of match the location stuff really well, which is something that Doctor Who doesn't always necessarily do properly. So it's really important that when it does, you really sort of notice. We have the story really has the Master presented to the audience as a changed man. He's sort of like, I've reformed. I've had time to think about it, and I'm not evil. And the Doctor doesn't quite buy it, which is of course cool. But we really get this idea that the Doctor wants to buy it. It's all through John Pertwee's subtle performance. This is really an episode for the Doctor. Jo is just sort of there. She hasn't done much. She's just sort of there as a soundboard, which isn't bad. Malcolm Mulk actually writes her really well. She gets some nice lines here and there in this first episode. But other than that, it's just she's just sort of there to be the sounding board for the Doctor, because it's like, well, this is really his story, it's not her story for the story. She's just sort of the one she's just sort of there to be there. The Doctor is the one actually doing stuff. Now, what is interesting about this is that the Master has he has the chance. We get this idea that where the Doctor really reveals that they were friends at one point. It's something that hasn't really come up before, and it gives this new layer as to why the Doctor wants the Master to actually have been reformed. But it also sort of explains a lot of the Master's actions in season 8, where he wouldn't necessarily kill. He would put the Doctor in these situations, but the Doctor would always get out of it. Of course, in Terror of the Autons, you have the scene where the Master rigs up a bomb in the middle of episode 1. Just for the next person that will open the radio telescope's door, knowing that it will probably be the Doctor, and the Doctor will disarm it, it's just the sort of, they have this sort of cat and mouse, and it really helps them feel more like equals in Time Lord society, which we haven't actually explored much of, outside of just, their little cameo at the beginning of Colony in Space. Oddly enough, also written by Malcolm Hulke. It's sort of interesting because Malcolm Hulke, when he writes for the Master, he sort of writes him as the same character, and he gives Roger Delgado something to do. You also sort of have this... Malcolm Hulke also really tries to use dramatic irony, sort of dramatic irony that the Doctor and Jo are at least partially on their way to being convinced that the Master's turned good, but we almost automatically see that, no, he's sort of manipulated his way. Even though, like, this prison, they have anti-hypnosis training. They are prepared for the Master and his antics. Well, the Master still has hypnotized the guy in charge and is sort of buddy-buddy. There's also a hilarious scene where the Master is watching, like, a kid's TV show called The Clangers, and he sort of tricks the guy into thinking that they're real life forms, which is... It's a weird scene, if I'm going to be very, very honest. The scene itself it's just sort of like, no, they're so real. And I'm just thinking, wait, what? Like, is that what we're going? But yeah, that's really where the episode's follows is really good. We have, of course, the Doctor and Jo after the stuff at the prison going to the naval base where they are attacked by something in the shadows. And that's our cliffhanger. And it's a really good cliffhanger. It's also really good because we don't actually get to see what the Sea Devils look like in this episode. At least, not yet. That's, of course, and this is a 6-part story. It helps leave the suspense, and it also sort of helps build an atmosphere that possibly there aren't actually going to be monsters. Now, of course, Sea Devils are now pretty famous monster, so obviously they're going to appear as actual monsters, not just like this whole, oh, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But yeah, so I'm going to give the Sea Devils episode 1 an 8 out of 10 because, again, it's just a little slow, but it's also really, really solid. Alright, it is the 21st of May, 2018, and I just finished watching the Sea Devils episode 2, and this episode, let's take a moment to talk about why pointless action can be a very, very good thing. Some people may say, oh, it just pads out the runtime. But when you have a 6-episode thing, you really want an action-packed cliffhanger every so often just to try to get your audience to come back every week. And the Sea Devils episode 2 does that in spades. We're going to sort of talk at the cliffhanger and work backwards because the cliffhanger is one of those moments that is just sort of known about Doctor Who that's happened. And that's when the Doctor and the Master have a sword fight. The context is, of course, that the Master, in this episode, he essentially escapes... with Trenchard, who was supposed to be looking over him, but of course Trenchard's been I don't know if he's been hypnotized, or just been convinced, I'm working for the greater good, and you should totally listen to me, because I'm not at all evil. I am not an evil mastermind, hell-bent on world domination. No, that's not a real thing. It's not who I am. It's a lie. It's a ploy. Just trust me, okay? Okay, you can trust me. I'm the Master. I know precisely what I'm talking about, even though, of course, he's the Master. He isn't actually that good of a guy. But you have this amazing, about 5-minute action scene of the Doctor and the Master having a sword fight, where the Doctor and the Master, they exchange quips like, you haven't seen the quality of my footwork yet. Or, enjoy that meal, Doctor, as the Doctor eats a sandwich, for it may be your last. And the big cliffhanger is actually the Master, while the Doctor's back is turned, because the Doctor ends up, of course, outshining the Master, throwing a throwing knife at him. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how they resolve it. It's shot also really, really well. As soon as the Master releases, that's when we cut. It's a way of ending it on the high point of the action. Like, you have tension. Oh, is he gonna miss? He's gonna duck? Wait, cut? We haven't seen it? That hasn't even released yet? All done in a split second. It's just sort of that quick mind reaction, and before you know it, the episode's over. And that's actually really, really good. Also, what's also really, really good is misdirection. Now, the end of episode 1 cliffhanger, jumping way back to the beginning, the art of misdirection is that the cliffhanger, it's not quite we heard the monster coming, but it wasn't the monster, it was one of the crew members of the fort, who's babbling about the monster. Now you think, oh, Now, of course, as this is Doctor Who, they needed to probably introduce that, yeah, the monsters are real. So they almost immediately show the Sea Devil in the background, but none of our heroes do. It sort of lets the audience let in that it's chasing them, even though the heroes don't know it. And we have a great chasing where the Doctor has to do, he essentially has to do an electric shock on the Sea Devil just so that it doesn't hurt them, which that's also really, really good. This episode, it does a lot of really clever misdirections like that. You also have the Doctor doing a last up of a radio. This is very much a Doctor-centric episode. It's moving our plot forward. We are introduced to Captain Hart about halfway through at a nearby naval base. He's going to be sort of our ally, as the Breeder isn't really going to show up in this story. He's not here, and you have Trenchard coming in and sort of stalling with him while the Master can steal. We know the Master's stealing equipment. We keep some mystery. We have this misdirect until it's sort of revealed that Jo actually notices the Master, and because it's Jo, she realizes it, which is what sort of leads to the sword fight at the end. And also, that reveal that Trenchard isn't as good as he says he is. He's also sort of a traditionalist. He's sort of the older, old Britain, go back to the old days of Britain when it was great, sort of character. He's interesting. Basically, this episode is just a lot of interesting, interspersed with some decent action and really good intrigue. Which they all sort of build together to create a really good episode of Doctor Who. Something that a lot of episodes really don't always do. So I'm going to give The Sea Devils Episode 2 a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is still the 21st of May 2018, and I just finished watching Episode 3 of The Sea Devils. I don't know why I said it like that. That's just sort of how it's said in the story. The Sea Devils, they start to make their more of an appearance in this episode, yet they're still sort of left as essentially background characters in the story, because they're the main villains, but really a lot of the focus is that this is a story about really the Master, essentially trying to escape and essentially trying to take over the world while still being in prison. And what's interesting is that this episode does quite a lot for Jo. It does quite a lot for Jo and the Doctor's relationship. It also really helps us flesh out Colonel Trenchard quite a lot, because if I'm going to be brutally honest, he was introduced as kind of a character who really doesn't do much. He's just sort of there to be, I guess, evil, but he's not really evil. He's just sort of misguided, you could say. He really has got that whole, I've got to do my duty for the world, and that sort of whole aspect of the plot is just part of his character. It's one of those things where he's like, well, I've got to be the one to, I've got to save the world, they're enemy agents. He's sort of, oddly enough, it's playing off of the fear of the Cold War, which was going on in the 70s at the time that this story was made. It's never specifically stated that he's afraid of the Russians, but he's afraid of the enemy, which it's pretty much coded that, he's probably scared of of enemy agents. That generally means the Russians at this time, because it was still the Soviet Union. We were still at a time where things weren't, the relations were bad. We would probably still have, we could easily have a nuclear war. This was also sort of this was a couple of years before Protect and Survive. That whole idea of Protect and Survive was circulated through Britain. So it was generally a fear in the population at the time, even if it wasn't a fear that was dumbfounded. And even this episode is taking it to an extreme. It gives Trenchard a bit of depth, mainly because he has his own motivations. He's not a bad guy overall. He's just been tricked by the Master, it's something that's really nice about Malcolm Hulke, because again, in a lot of Malcolm Hulke stories, one of my complaints about Colony in Space was that the villains were purely evil, whereas this is more like the Silurians, where none of the characters are really evil. They're just sort of they have their own different motivations, and they sort of justify their actions in their own heads, which is something that's really, really nice to have. It's a nice sort of portrayal of a different type of villain. You don't have the mustache twirling, mwahaha, of course, well, you do because you have the master. But yeah, so, like, you can really see why Trenchard wants to lock the Doctor up, and because the Doctor is interfering with their plans, and it could cause the end of the world. Even though that's not actually specifically stated, but that's just sort of what the implication is. It's all done through implying what might happen with the world, not by specifically saying this is what we're going for. No, it's all done through, we need to imply this. This is a story where we imply things, and it's really, really good at that. Like, it's a really good story overall. It's good at doing that. It's much it's keeping sort of the story strong. The episode's a little long. You have some really good characterization of Joe Grant, who the writer, again, especially after Day of the Daleks 2 stories ago, you had the whole, she was kind of iffy. This, we bring back her idea that, she did take a course in escapology. She's the one who gets to rescue the Doctor who gets captured, which is a nice little role reversal of the Doctor rescuing the companion, or them rescuing each other because they're both captured, as it was a lot of the times in the Hartnell era. But it's something that, it's just something new, something different, something slightly less, something out of the norm, that really helps the audio, like the story, feel complete. It feels like, this is the story we're going for, that the Doctor needed help rescuing, so Joe rescued him, and it was really good. They have some great moments like that. You also have Joe just being generally clever, using her idea that, she knows something, she needs to get back to the naval base. That avenue's run, let's get the Doctor, he'll know what to do, because I'm out of my depth right here. So, it crafts a reasonably good portrayal. And then you have the Doctor and Joe escaping to the beach just so they could try to loop around and try to get out that way. But, and that actually leads us to our cliffhanger, where you have a minefield on one side, Solus going on the other, and then a sea devil rising out from the deep, with the Master over a hill. And that is a really good cliffhanger. Like, that's how you do a cliffhanger. This episode itself is just really, really good. It knows how it wants to, be. It's got some pacing problems. Again, because we're just now, it's trying to do the same slow pace of the Silurians, but because we already kind of know, like, we've already had an explanation as to what the villains are, that they're sea devils and they're essentially cousins of the Silurians. You really have a lot of scenes where it just is like, it's trying to build tension, but the tension just doesn't build as much, because we already have experience. Again, we have the past story, and that was only 2 seasons back. That wasn't that long ago in terms of plot. So I'm going to give the Sea Devils, episode 3, an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 22nd of May, 2018, and I just finished watching episode 4 of The Sea Devils. Why do I keep saying, I don't think I will ever quite understand, but, sue me, I'm weird. I think it's partially because that's sort of the way Roger Delgado says it. And this episode is sort of it's another bridge between the first and second half of the story. The first thing I noticed, and this is morally on the technical side, this is actually one of the few episodes of the Pro era that has the original PAL 2-inch. Yeah, I believe they're PAL 2-inch. I believe they're 2 inches long. But one of the original 2-inch master videotapes. The last 3 episodes of the story, they somehow actually survive. The videotapes actually survive, which is great, because it sort of makes these last 3 episodes look sharper and better just as episodes. They have these nice sharp angles, and the color isn't quite as fuzzy, which is something that happens when it comes to that's something that sort of just happens when it comes to just these old episodes. They're old, and the restoration team always does an amazing job. I can't sing their praises enough, because they're great at getting things in tip-top shape. They are really good. But as an episode, let's say that this is probably the weakest of the episodes so far. Not for any reasons of it being bad, because it is a great episode still. Like, this story has just been on fire, which is great, because I know what story comes after this one, and, well, I'm not looking forward to it. But as an episode, it doesn't do everything for me. Mainly, it's overly long, and it doesn't accomplish too much. We have some nice tense scenes built around the submarine that went from the last episode being boarded by a sea devil, and the sea devil actually being there to essentially, the sea devil being there and threatening the crew and forcing them into essentially following them instead of them just getting him off. And those are some nice tense scenes, but nothing quite comes of that. And that really just leads. It's really just the Doctor and Joe. The best bits of the episode are the resolution of the cliffhanger, where the Doctor and Joe, they go and they risk the minefield, and we use the sonic screwdriver to detect where the mines are so they don't get blown up. And then the Doctor also uses the sonic to remotely detonate the landmines. So then, well, never to kill the Sea Devil, which is something very, very interesting. The Doctor doesn't actually kill the Sea Devil, but he does scare it enough that it goes away, and they are able to get to the naval base. And then they go down into a submarine and try to figure out what's going on with the submarine. That's a large part of the episode. It's John Pertwee and Katie Manning are great in those scenes, mainly because they have this sense about them that they are both terrified. Like, they don't quite know if they are actually going to make it out of this one alive, because, well, they are going right into a minefield. They're traversing a minefield where they very easily could end up dead. It's not something that they really that it may not end well for them. It's something that they have to try to traverse this minefield, and this minefield, it's obviously because it's full of landmines aren't easily avoidable. They're very hard to avoid, and there's a fear that they may not make it out, and that's great. Like, that's amazing. And then the back half of the episode is great too, where the Doctor actually goes down and into the submarine, into a sub. They go down, they lower a diving cage down, they bring it back up, and the Doctor's missing. That's also a great scene, because it's like, well, where did he go? The sub's missing. Even if it's not necessarily shot the best, because there is quite a bit of a problem with just they sort of pad it out. Like, they reveal that he's missing, and then they wait a little bit more, and then they let Joe go down and reveal, he actually is missing this whole time. Like, yeah, it's just shot in a way that it just sort of goes on a little. It needs to be snappier. But that's a minor complaint. You have the Master trying to explain to Trenchard the Sea Devil, that's what we're fighting. But you said it's enemy agents. Well, I lied. I kind of lied. Of course, Delgado doing this in the suave, I'm the Master sort of way. But he's like, I lied because, well, the Sea Devils themselves, well, they're who would believe me? I'm just looking out for you, man. Your reputation, they would believe you, so we're just telling them they're enemy agents, but we need to fight them. Even though the Master is probably going to try to work with them, because his pattern, his modus operandi is sort of, find an alien. Step 1, find an alien species to invade Earth with. Step 2, make an alliance with that species. Step 3, invade Earth. Step 4, be betrayed by that alien species and be defeated by the Doctor, potentially being captured or escaping. It depends on where we are in the season. It's just one of those things that, well, you know it's not going to end quite correctly because, well, why would it? It's the master. He's the master of ill thought out plans. And the Sea Devil designs are actually really, really nice. They look very, very amphibious. They look, and they look like something that would be near the sea. And they're different enough from the Silurians that you don't just see as much. I mean, yeah, they probably could do without the weird nettings, because that's just kind of dumb. Like, it's like, oh, yes, we have to have the netting because without it, they look kind of naked, and there's a complaint. And you know what? I can see the complaint. I think it would have been better if they just left it without. They just got rid of the netting. That would probably be better for just for a matter of that. Yeah, it's not. We don't need the nets, because it's kind of silly. So yeah, I'm going to give the Sea Devils episode 4 a 7 out of 10 because it's a little slower. We've slowed down the pace quite a bit, and you know we really should be trying to ramp it up to a conclusion, not slow it down. Alright, it is still the 22nd of May 2018, and I just finished watching episode 5 of the Sea Devils. And this episode is an episode that knows how to give us, oddly enough, and I'm starting at the end here, it knows how to give us a snappy cliffhanger. Now, why do I say that? Well, because the cliffhanger is this, this story has the Doctor reappearing as, as he does, and this, this sort of has the added effect of, well, the Doctor not only reappears for the story to work, but we have quite a few scenes under the sea where, well, we get to figure out that that these titular Sea Devils, well, like the Silurians, they're willing to negotiate, at least at the beginning. And you know what? It's great to see the Doctor actually still try to figure out a way to be like, hey, let us negotiate this. Like, you don't quite know what you're doing. We could have the chance here to really give us to really give us a good solid solution to everything, but you're not letting us have it. We just give us the chance, and you'll see that human beings are probably worth saving. Like they are, they're the ones who have a claim to this planet. They deserve to live. They don't deserve to be killed. They're ones that they've seen themselves, essentially they've seen themselves, as the rightful owners of this planet, and, why should you stop them? They aren't hurting anybody. They're decent people, not the evil human beings as you have made them out to be. They listen to me because I am the master is also trying to obviously the master is trying to deceive you, not actually be your friend. He's not. Don't listen to him. He's not trustworthy. You need everything before everything. We can try to save you, and then you have something. And then you have the 11th hour twist that sort of really helps make this story as a story. Well, it makes it feel like a complete story. And it makes it actually be able to go on to have an episode 6 without feeling like we're dragging things out to the end. Like, because well, let's be honest, a lot of Doctor Who stuff, especially a lot of stuff in classic Doctor Who so far, um, gets dragged out a lot. You have because you have characters and their own motivations, and with that, and you have in 6 episodes is you got plenty of time to tell a story, but not always enough time to. But sometimes they don't have enough material to fit all 6 episodes. But here we have a permanent secretary for Parliament come down to the naval base and order an all-out attack on the Sea Devil's base, which is that's a twist that just sort of it grabs you and you're like, wow, I can't actually believe that this happened. Like, really? They're not going to even think of like, that the doctor might be down there because he doesn't care. It's like he can be dead for all they care because he has to, and he'd just be a sacrifice for king and country. It's a quick. Oh my gosh, this is serious. We've had the doctor. We have we have everything really there for a good story. But it's just like, well, that's what you have to do. If that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. You don't get a choice. You in the matters. You have to. You have you have to destroy them. It's great the way it gets done. Like it builds and builds. The tension builds as Joe tries to tell him no, no, and then eventually the doctor does show up, and the doctor gets this amazing little speech. And it's not a speech that completely. It's one that not many people talk about. What you have is that is you have the fact that the doctor is that the doctor tells him, wouldn't you rather be a hero for brokering peace instead of being known for starting a war? And it's this moment, and it's very, very small, but it's amazing that that's what gets through. It's like you'd be remembered. It's sort of playing to the human nature of this guy that you really don't want to start a war, because the permanent secretary is kind of in over his head with this. He's not really there. He's not really there with the best of intentions. He's kind of a bumbling idiot. And he doesn't get too much to do, but he still cares enough to be like, well, maybe I shouldn't start a war. And it's a nice little moment. Also, of course, the designs are great, and the direction has been great, and it's been great to actually see all the location footage. Just because the location footage in here was great. So I'm going to give the Sea Devils episode 5 a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is still the 22nd of May, 2018. And because of someone I know on the internet, I actually finished the Sea Devils tonight. Completely not intending to. Trust me, I probably wouldn't have done this if it weren't for the fact that it was just like, okay, I'm finishing the episode tonight. So, yeah, that one's gonna be interesting, pretty interesting overall. We have, well, in this one, we've got, we've got an episode that is a decent enough conclusion, but it really doesn't do too much special with it. Mainly, peace talks break out. The the entire story ends with characters who basically fall apart because you have the Sea Devils attacking everyone, and you know what? That that one that one is one of those things that 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 one's just one that it happens. It doesn't really do too much for the story itself, but it's just sort of there. You have you have the story. The story really has the Doctor again trying to finish just about everything. You have this story that it's just sort of it builds some interesting cases. There just isn't there isn't there isn't too much there for the story. You have the story you have the story that sort of ends as it just sort of ends with a good old-fashioned chase scene, and we end quite with just the Master being unmasked as someone else. So there really isn't too much to this episode. So I'm gonna give episode 6 of the Sea Devils a 7 out of 10. That, of course, concludes this episode, The Sea Devils, so we take the scores and average them up to give The Sea Devils a final score of 8.16 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and join me next time when, well, we take the penultimate Season 9 story with The Mutants.